Hi everybody, welcome back, and if this is your first time, welcome. My name is Max Haddad, and today I'm going to tell you about some of the scariest stuff that happened to me because of my addiction. Ahead of time, trigger warning, this is straight up just going to be a war story about me when I was actively using. I know some of you are either just now getting sober or still in active addiction but fighting it, or you've got, kids, just loved ones in general that are struggling with addiction. So this might not be the video for you, but this was an idea that I had when I was thinking about this thing that happened to me the other day. And I decided that I wanted to talk about it, but I understand if this is potentially going to upset you. It's not the worst thing that could happen to an addict. Obviously death is, or at least high up there on the list, but it was scary for me. It was, yeah, I'll just tell you, but just be warned. So I was living in New York. I had first moved to New York living with my brother, overdosed at his house, our apartment, moved out, lived with a girlfriend for a little bit. Clearly that was a bad idea. And then I went and got my own place on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Now, I have always been a heroin addict. Not always. It wasn't like, a baby and like, give me that needle. I have not always been a heroin addict. But basically, opiates have always been my drug of choice as an addict. I would use cocaine to come up, and then I would use opiates to come down. And I would do that dance over and over and over again until something awful happened. Stay up for days, really hyped, and then try to come down softly, and eventually you just end up in the hospital. And it didn't take very long. So that was what I normally used. But in New York, I was on a crack bender. I couldn't find any, anyways, I warned you. I couldn't find any powdered cocaine, so I decided to smoke crack, which I had done many times before. But whatever. The people that you interact with to get that are sometimes different than the people you interact with to get powdered cocaine. Not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying you go to different places. So I was on a bender. I was hanging out with this homeless guy who I didn't know him before I started smoking crack. I started smoking crack. He was there, and then we started running around the city together, picking up more, doing stuff to get money, all sorts of, gross stuff. And when I say homeless, I don't mean, oh, homeless, scary. I mean, like, he was a man without a home. That's just a detail that is important to the story because he literally just lived on the streets. So I was basically using him as a connection to everything because he knew how to navigate that world. And I had not really done that, especially not in New York City. And we end up at this very nice apartment complex, but it looked like a hotel. It looked like you walk in and everything's golden. Like, they've got statues in the main lobby downstairs, and it's just nice, but it's also antiquated. It's very strange because it felt like it was like 1970s decor, but you could tell very, very posh. But then we went upstairs, right? Like, we got in the elevator. You have to go up to the desk and the people that, whatever. You have to know somebody there. You can't just walk in and go, to a different floor in the hotel. The person who you're going to see has to basically buzz you up, and the lobby opens, the person at the desk opens the elevator for you, and then you can go, and only the floor that you are supposed to be going to is unlocked. So you can press that button, up you go. And the hotel changes. Like, it's very, very nice in the lobby, and then it's very, very, very not nice everywhere else. As soon as you were, getting like the inside story of the hotel, it was run down, and the rooms were insanely small and close together. And the reason I know that is because we went and we visited a person named Simone. And Simone was a man who liked to dress like a woman, which is fine. I didn't have a lot of interaction with that up to that point in my life, but so it was, not off-putting, but it was like startling. But sometimes Simone liked to be called Josie, and sometimes Josie was not feeling feminine and she liked to be called Hector. And when she was Hector, then she was a man and not a woman. And We went to see Simone to buy crack, I thought, and the room was as big as a walk-in closet, you know, like room. There was, the bathroom was a separate room, but that was very, very, very small. And there was only one sink, so like no sink in the bathroom. You use the toilet, shower, and then you went to the kitchen, which is basically the living room, to wash your hands. And so there's a bed. There's about 2 feet of space to stand and, make a drug deal. And then there's the bathroom. And as we were buying it, I saw it, and I just said to the guy I was with, whose name I literally can't even remember, like, that doesn't look like crack. And he said, that's glass, meaning that's meth. It's crystal meth. And I smoked it. It was the first time I had done it. I'm not going to go into the high and all that because that's not what this is about. Long story short, I loved it. And more than I loved it, it was very hard to not do it once I had done it. And I was doing it on top of lots of other drugs. I was doing it on top of heroin and smoking crack and meth and Xanax and smoking weed, which who cares, and drinking. And all of this was happening at the same time. And I could kind of take or leave any of the other stuff, not the heroin because I would get sick. I could definitely take or leave like the alcohol and the weed and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, once meth crept in, it didn't leave. And so I kept staying up for longer and longer. And like I said, I had experience staying up for 3-4 days at a time. But meth, that's like its key characteristic is you do not sleep. There's not, like, at the end of my using days, I could use cocaine and fall asleep if I really wanted to, which I didn't, but if I wanted to, I could have managed it. Meth, you're just not going to bed until you stop. And it takes a long time to work through your system. So it's, again, not like cocaine where you do some and then 10 minutes it peaks and then 30 minutes it's basically gone. It's hours and hours and hours. Like if you take one hit, you smoke it, and then it's like 16 hours later it's just now working its way all the way out. So basically you use it, just plan on being up for days, and the chances of somebody, especially somebody like me, using it just the one time is slim to none. So I started staying up for longer, and I started staying up really, like a week. And then all of a sudden I'm up for 2 weeks. And after a week, stuff's already bonkers. Stuff doesn't make any sense. And I'm doing crazy stuff that I think needs to be done. And these are mild examples, but like I'm like rearranging the house, and it's the apartment that I lived in, and it's very, very serious. Like this couch needs to be there. And I can't even remember, it didn't make any sense, but like it needs to be there. Plus I was hallucinating stuff, like I would be petting my cat and then blink and my cat was on the other side of the room. And so I don't know, and I can't prove or disprove, but I was either having micro sleeps, which is basically when your body is like, you're going to sleep no matter what, because your brain is trying to protect itself. So you fall asleep for like half a second, literally, and then you're back awake. So I don't know if my cat somehow got to the other side of the room when that happened, but I'm fairly certain I was petting a hallucination. And like looking back on it, it's maybe a little upsetting, kind of sort of funny, I guess, but at the time it was terrifying. And stuff starts to get really weird. And it's around Thanksgiving. And I was sitting in my apartment. I've been up for a long time. And I was playing guitar and singing loudly. This is on Thanksgiving. And my next door neighbor, who I've never met, comes and knocks on the door, and I expect him to say, hey, we're having Thanksgiving dinner. If you could keep it down, that would be great. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rude. He's such a wonderful person. He comes over, knocks on the door, and says, hey, are you in here by yourself? And I said, yeah, man, but I'm good. He said, no, nobody should be alone on Thanksgiving. So if I was coherent and wanted to, like, stay by myself and not go hang out with strangers, which were all so kind and wonderful to invite me in, but if I just felt antisocial, I could have come up with the reason, but I couldn't think of one because I had been up for so long and I was very much under the influence. And so I go over to this apartment and I'm terrified. It's the worst social anxiety I've ever had without having a panic attack, because I am fucked up. And I am not just fucked up on drugs. I am fucked up on not having slept. And I don't really know what's going on, and I'm in this people's house, and I have zero appetite, because that's how meth works too, but I'm having to force food down because I don't want these people to be offended that they invited me in, and I'm like, ooh, your food, gross. And like, I could gag on the food. Like, it could, delicious Thanksgiving meal was so fucking disgusting, because that's what methamphetamines do to you, that you don't eat. And so I'm sitting there doing my best, and they don't seem to know that I am like in a different dimension while they're celebrating their Thanksgiving dinner as a family. And then they start talking about meth. And they start talking about how they hate meth addicts, and how somebody that one of them knew was a meth addict, and they hated him because of that. And meth addicts are disgusting and they should quit. And I thought, oh my God, what are the chances that they're so nice and wonderful, and I end up here and they don't know that I'm using meth. And then they just start talking about it incessantly. The whole family, the old man, the patriarch of the family, who doesn't even look like he's ever heard of meth, is talking about it in detail and how he thinks people that use it are disgusting. What are the chances of that? And the chances of that are zero. Zero. Because I started hallucinating. The whole family talking about meth, suspecting everyone to be on meth, but not pointing the finger at me. So as I'm sitting there, and I realize, part of my brain, a very small part, realizes this may be a delusion. And of course, I can't prove it to you that that's what it was or it wasn't, but just, maybe take my word for it. I was there and you weren't, so shut up. And I just find a tactful way to leave. Like, I had eaten my meal, had a drink or two with them. It had probably been like an hour and a half. And so I could casually leave. So I go back to my apartment and I take a deep sigh of relief. And so I said, well, I can't do this anymore. And so I went to bed. And that's not at all true, because I immediately started using more meth, because I was, just like an addict does, trying to fix their feelings with chemicals. So I used more. And then my vision started blinking red. And then my vision went literally black and white. And I don't know the science behind this. I know that the way that it works, the way that our ocular lenses work, is that we actually see things upside down, and then our brain flips it right side up so we can interact with the world correctly. Seriously, look it up. It's kind of insane. And if you wear goggles that like mirror the world, so it flips what you're seeing upside down, for a while, you'll be very confused, but eventually your brain will fix it and change it. And then when you take the goggles off, you'll have to readjust to how things are supposed to be. I wouldn't advise it, but it happens. It's how the brain works and how the eye works. The eye is, hopefully, you're not wearing an eye patch. And anybody out there with one eye, I'm sorry. And so blinking black and white, and then my vision flipped upside down, and it stayed like that for about 30 seconds or so. I can't say how long, but it wasn't very long. And so I don't know if that happened because my brain was like exhausted and shutting off, or if it was just a delusion. I don't know, but I experienced it as though it was what it was. Regardless, my brain was not having a great time. So all of a sudden my vision's upside down, and then I'm back in my apartment, vision's back to, normal. But there's weird chittering in my ears, right? And there's like whispering. And I had to be careful not to look at my arms, because my hair looked like bugs. So it was, crawling. And this is all just sleep deprivation. Like, yes, meth causes you to stay awake, and that causes the hallucinations, but it's not like you smoke meth and now you hallucinate. It's not a direct result of the drug. It's an indirect result, but basically they're operate hand in hand because you stay up when you're on it. And I'm freaking out. And then there's these swooping black, like shadow birds that were in my apartment. And so I left, thinking that, well, clearly those are real black shadow birds, and they are in my apartment, and I'm not qualified to handle that. I'm not a ghostbuster. So I'm going to go outside and get some air. So I go outside, and I'm walking down, I don't remember what avenue, it was probably First Avenue. And I believe it was like midnight at this point. And I'm scanning the ground because there was one time that I lived in New York City and I found a bag of Coke, a very small bag that some junkie had dropped when he saw a cop, probably. I don't know. And it being, you know, on the ground in New York City, it was gross and disgusting, and I still used it. Of course, I think any addict out there totally gets me when I say, of course I used it. It was like Christmas. I couldn't believe it. But because of that, my meth-addled brain was like, oh, you're going to find it again. So not only did I find it, I kept finding it. Every single little mark in the concrete, in the sidewalk, was a bag of drugs. And I would lean in and I would pick it up and I would realize that's not what it was. It was either literally just like trash, a gum wrapper, or just, you know, chewed gum, or it was not even there. It was just like a little hole in the concrete. And I did it, I don't know how many times I did it, you know, walking probably a few miles, we'll go with First Avenue, up and down First Avenue, bending over and trying to pick up this bag of drugs that I swore was there. And it wasn't like you do it once, twice, and you're like, oh, I'm fucked up. Of course it's not there. You keep thinking, oh, that one, the last 1,000 weren't, but this one is. And I've always been a carpet surfer. For those of you that know what that is, yeah, I know, I'm scummy, whatever. For those of you that don't know, basically it's somebody that has a certain amount of drugs and they drop a little bit on the ground, and then the rest of the night they're like looking for it. So I've always been that way. And that's basically what I was doing, but I was doing that in the middle of New York City, not the middle of New York City, but the east side of New York City, and it was bad. And, you know, it's midnight, and it's not a very, like, hip part of town. It's typically old money or, you know, young professionals, but they're not out drinking. That's not where you do it. You'd go elsewhere in the city to do that. So there's not a ton of people out, but there are people out. And when I realized what I had been doing, like, oh, I finally realized, oh, my God, I've been digging, like, around in the concrete in New York City in the middle of summer. It's gross and dirty. It's always dirty, but it's worse in summer for drugs that aren't there. And I realized, like, oh my God, I'm screwed up. And then I started walking, and I was walking by people. You know, there'd be like a cafe open late, and there'd be somebody outside sweeping, and I would walk by, and they're not it's New York, so they're not like, hi sir, how you doing? They're not acknowledging me, and I'm not acknowledging them, and that's normal. But as I would walk by them, I would pass and I would hear them say my name. I would hear them say, Max Haddad, he's high on meth. And I would pass a group of people, a couple people. This is the one I remember the most. And they said, it's the witching hour. What is Max doing out right now? Basically, it was accusational. Of course, it was a delusion. They weren't actually saying that. They didn't know who I was. And even if they did, they would not say that. But it was like accusational delusions. Auditory hallucinations of someone like trying to vindicate themselves by solving the case, is Max high or not? Because I had so much guilt about using. I knew that I didn't want to be doing it. At that point in my life, I wasn't fully convinced, but I knew that it made the people around me very, 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 very upset. And I didn't want to be, because I knew it got in the way of everything I loved. But I wasn't fully convinced that I couldn't do it yet. But yeah, they were, you know, pointing the finger at me in my brain. And so I go back to the apartment, and I am basically in a blackout at this point. So I don't fully remember what happened to cause this, but I took my blood pressure because I was freaking out. And if you're, you know, if you have panic attacks, like the worst thing you can do is check your blood pressure. But my blood pressure was 300/200. And that scared me. I thought I was having a heart attack. And then the next thing I remember is I wake up on my couch. I don't know if I woke up. I don't know if I had fallen asleep and then woke up, but I like came to. I didn't feel rested at all. Like I didn't feel better at all. And my whole apartment was disgusting. It was littered with like packing peanuts that I had spilled on the ground, I guess, at some point, but they were all mashed up. So it was like packing peanuts, but I think I had been crawling around on the ground on them or something. So they were mashed everywhere. And there were, this is gross, and I'm embarrassed to say it, and I've told a lot of people about it, but it still embarrasses me. But there were bowls of piss all around the couch. Like containers, not just bowls, but containers of it, because when my blood pressure was that high, whenever I would stand up, my chest would hurt really bad, and it could have just been anxiety. I don't know, but my chest would hurt really bad, and I could feel it doing that. And so and keep in mind, I had already had a stroke at this point, like a year, maybe less than a year prior. So I was scared that I was going to have a stroke again or a heart attack again. Not scared enough not to use meth, but you know, it's a disease. It's not a moral choice, right? It has nothing to do with intellect. So I couldn't stand up to go to the bathroom. At least I thought I couldn't. So I was just taking things around me that I could pee into and peeing into them. And like, it's embarrassing. I'm more over it than I've ever been in my life, but it's gross. And I tried to call the girlfriend for help. The girlfriend that we moved away from each other, but we were still dating. Even though I'm sure we both knew at that point, like, this is not going to work out. Like, obviously, if we lived together and it didn't work out and we move apart, we're just eventually going to break up. But we hadn't admitted that to ourselves even, but definitely not to each other. So I called her, and we still cared about each other. It wasn't awful, but we clearly didn't have chemistry that way. Called her and, you know, like to try to get her to come over to help me basically. And she was busy. And I'm sure I wasn't being fully honest with her, because I'm sure I wasn't saying I'm on meth and I am hallucinating, help me. That's not what I said. I just said I'm freaking out or something. And she probably knew he's using, so I'm not going to go over there to nurse him to health while he's using, which is totally, I think, probably fair, as long as as long as somebody's not going to kill themselves, you know, if you don't want to be around them to change their diety while they're using, I think that's okay. No, it is okay. I don't think it is okay. Of course, take care of yourself. And so, like, that was it. There had been so much garbage. And when I say that was it, I woke up, like, literally, I was supposed to go to work the next day. And I woke up and I thought it was the next day. And I already knew I wasn't going to work, right? I knew I was going to wake up and call in, because there's no way that even, you know, if I get 8 hours, 10 hours of sleep, it takes days and days and days and days and weeks to feel normal after something like that, just being up that long. And so I fell asleep and I woke up and I was going to call work, and I picked up my phone and it had literally been 3.5 days. I woke up at 6. I thought it was 6 a.m. It was 6 p.m. 3 days later. I had just been unconscious for that long. So I ate. I was very, very, very hungry. I had to order food because all the food in my fridge was rotten. And you can ask my dad for confirmation on that. We went back after a period of time. Like, I'd moved back to Indiana. We went back after like 3 weeks, something like that. And the power had been shut off. And so the fridge had, like, not just bugs, not just cockroaches, but like a hive of egg, like, you know, where the fridge, you know, like closes, like that little lip that I think helps it to become like airtight, was just layered with like cocoons, like little tiny black cocoons. And there were these bugs crawling everywhere. It was fucking horrendous, because there was a big hunk of ham that had rotted, just rot, and everything else also. So it was disgusting. And those bowls of piss had fucking never been emptied, so they just like evaporated. So there was these sodium deposits in these bowls from me. Gross. And I don't know that I have to explain to you why this was so scary. I mean, because I've nearly died many times from addiction. And this one, I don't, even though I was afraid it was going to be lethal, I actually don't think I was that close to death. I was going to say, I think most deaths from meth are caused by accidents from sleep deprivation, but I can't say that for sure. I don't know that that's the majority, and I'm sure that you can go into cardiac arrest from it, but it's harder. I know this for sure. It's harder than you would think. Like, it's easier to die from cardiac arrest from cocaine than it is from meth, even if meth seems so much more intense. But even though it wasn't as lethal as some other things I've been through, it was scary because it was literally like I was in a nightmare. Like, I woke up in a nightmare, and everything in the world was directed at me negatively. In my face, behind my back. You know, I couldn't even get my cat. Like, you know, I tried to pet my cat. By the way, through all this, Most of you know I love animals to death. Like I have, you know, I love animals. My cat was actually fine. There was even a time when I ran him to the vet in the middle of the night because I was afraid that I had hurt him. So like, don't worry about that. I probably wouldn't tell you this if I had hurt my cat, because I would be too upset with myself still. Now it wasn't ideal for him, obviously, but I was still giving him plenty of attention, even if it was high attention and the connection wasn't there like it should be. He was being fed and loved on and things like that. And like I said, I took him to the vet in the middle of all that, even though that's not safe and not great. I did the best job I could do in the position I was in to take care of him. So I don't want you to think that he was, you know, in the apartment by himself for a ton of time or not fed or anything like that. That is not the case. I don't even think I'd have this YouTube channel if I'd done that to him. So it was scary, yeah, because it was like hell. It was just, you know, some of you out there are going to know what I'm talking about. And I think most of you, if not all of you, can imagine what I'm talking about, because it was a complete fantasy world in all the worst ways. But when you're so delusional like that, you can't convince yourself, even if you know that this is not real. This is not real. Even if you know that and you keep saying it to yourself over and over and over again, your brain never learns the lesson that it's not real. So you keep interacting with it as though it's real, and it keeps affecting you as though it's real, and it's terrifying. And I've had similar things from other drugs and similar things from the same drug, but never to that level. And it was spooky. It really was. So, sorry if this video triggered you in any way. I don't know. Maybe it's not as bad as I think it is, but it, you know, is bad for me. Hope you have a wonderful day. I will talk to you soon. Bye.